Hello and welcome to my first Twitch stream. Bear with me because I don't really know what I'm doing yet with the whole Twitch business, and I imagine there will be many times during this stream when nobody is watching and I'll still be talking, but that's okay because I'm practicing. So my plan for this stream is to I've been working on this city here. This is the largest city in our game that we're working on, called Eastshade, and it's a pretty early stage. It's I would say about 10%. You can see that it's got some form to it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff here blocked out, and there's quite a few buildings that the exteriors are fleshed out, like these walls here. And this kind of gate business, and this center building has quite a bit of art on it as well. And then there's some buildings that are kind of half, like this one right here, which has a couple window holes and trims, but it's looking pretty bland. But most of them are just like these big blobby boxes. In the city as a whole, here, let me jump in right here. Is what on earth is that? Well, I don't know what that is feeling pretty Spartan at the moment. So my plan is to make a planter box right here, if you can see my mouse, kind of filling up this space. I kind of think of it like an avenue in a city that has two wide streets going each way, and a large middle section with trees and planters and whatnot. I think that'll fill out the space well. All right, so I'm gonna jump right into that. I use Blender to do all of my 3D modeling, and I have my own special exporter as well to actually get my props into Unity. All right. So the first thing I'm doing is selecting everything and basically making sure that nothing exports from my file. I know that sounds really weird, but it's because what I'm about to do, I'm making a new prop in this file, and my special exporter will only export like what I mark it to in the file, which is really helpful because then I can kind of put everything in one big Blender file and just designate certain things to export. All right. So I'm going to call this I don't know, Shade City Planter 1. And LD0 is like LOD 0. Usually people call it LOD 0, but I don't, because when you do that in Unity, it like automatically sees that and it like tries to make a LOD out of it, and I like to have control over like where my LODs are going. All right. All right, so the first thing I like to do right away is just to get whatever I'm making in the engine as soon as possible. So the bare minimum, I have a box here and I want to get a material on there. I'm gonna go for this Castle Rock material. And I need to put the texture on there as well so I can actually see what it looks like when I'm doing my UVs, which if you know about Blender, then it's pretty standard. Okay. Oh dear, this is just the worst. Okay. So I'll get some really quick and dirty UVs. Make sure this thing is parented, make sure the name is right. Shade City Planner 1 looks good. And it's got a material. So now I just press a hotkey, and by the time I go back over to Unity, it'll already be in there. So here's my new prop. And whenever I have a new prop in that's not going to have animations, I always like to just disable the rig and animations in the import settings. Okay, so here is my first pass of the planter. All right, so I'm just kind of positioning it, and now right off the bat I'm gonna delete the bottom face because I don't need that. And I'm going to give the planter some shape. I want it to be a bit of a curved planter because I think that will look cool with the curved road. Okay. And I immediately export it because I can tell that it's probably not going to be orientated right. All right. So I try to go back and forth between the engine and Blender a lot, like probably once every 30 seconds, because I think that one can get really carried away just looking at it in Blender and not seeing it in the greater context of the game. And my setup here in Blender is, I would imagine, fairly confusing because it's it's this planter with this other stuff behind it, and then you go into Unity and that's not the same stuff that's around it, and that's because my exporter is only exporting this one thing, this one planter, and I just work on the one thing. I just like to keep everything in one file so that if like I want to go through and like change textures and things, everything's in one Blender file, and I can just press one key, and the script I wrote will just loop through everything and export it off as individual props, which is really helpful for the way I work. All right, so I'm just looking at this thing and trying to make some design decisions about its length and its size, and what's going to look good. So I'm making it a little bit bigger, and smoothing out this jagged part. And now I just press my hotkey, and it's already exported it back, and I can just Alt Tab back and see my updates immediately in Unity, which is really nice. Okay. So I know this is probably looks kind of jerky when I'm just looking at this thing from every angle, and in real life right now I'm like turning my head to the side and turning it every which way, and I just am always trying to get a really like objective feel. And really trying to just get out of the mindset of working on the one prop and trying to see it in the greater context of the game. Okay, so its curvature isn't really conforming to the environment around it, so I'm just trying to adjust that a little. All right, and this, I can tell right now, like the planner going this close to the fountain just feels a little bit tight, and it's going to feel a little bit tight, I think, when NPCs are trying to navigate through it and stuff. And by the way, anyone watching, you know, if anyone has questions, feel free to ask away. That's you know, like I say in my FAQ, if I'm on here, then I'm open to questions. That's kind of the point. And to help me focus. At least I'm trying it out. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Okay, so now I'm actually going to make the inside of the planner. So I'm just using a tool called Inset, which is a very lovely tool in Blender. Okay, now all of this stuff in the middle is going to be dirt. So I'm just going to separate it to a different model and give it a different material. Let's see if I have dirt. No, I don't have any dirt, so I'm going to have to open an image and do my least favorite thing, which is browse for stuff. Mud, I think I have a texture called. Oh dear. This is going to be the rest of the stream, just me looking for this thing. Here, mud diffuse. Okay. So I changed the texture, but of course we always have to remember to also change the material. So it's currently mapped to Castle Rock. And I think I have a material called Mud 1. And as long as the name matches, then it should link up in Blender. So the deal with my exporter, like now I have two objects. This is an object and this is an object. And normally the default exporter for Blender to Unity, like if you just save the .blend and open it in Unity, all of the objects will remain intact, which can be a good thing, but for me it's really, really terrible because I like to keep all my objects separate, and if I might have like instances in Blender that I don't necessarily want to be instance objects in Unity. So that's why I use this script. As long as everything is parented to this one like dummy object, then when I put it in Blender, you can see that now this is one object, it's one mesh, but it just has submaterials. And my script is like in charge of separating out the submaterials and making submeshes out of it. Okay, so it looks like I didn't have a material called Mud 1 because it's gray right now. So, oh, it's just called Mud. It's not called Mud 1. So as long as the name matches, then it'll find the material. So just change the name, go back, and now you can see it actually hooked up to the mud material. And the mud looks a little bit massive in its features. So scale it up on the texture, on the UVs I mean, and the texture details will get smaller. Okay. All right. So I have all this stretching here because of this is where I extruded. Now my favorite unwrapping tool in Blender is called Follow Active Quads. Now if you use Blender and you have never used that, you should check it out. I'll show you exactly what it does. So oh cool, I got a follow. Thank you, Basic Panther. Really appreciate that. My first follow during a stream at any rate. Okay, so if you could just unwrap one face and make sure the face is squared up. So I just scale it in the Y to 0, scale it in the Y to 0, scale in the X to 0, X to 0, and I'm just making sure this is all squared up, and then I can say Control L in my Blender perspective view, and then I do Follow Active Quads. And you can see it just like perfectly aced this entire thing. Like the unwrap is perfect for this particular shape. And that's just because all of these are quads and these are perfect edge loops. And the Follow Active Quads does a really good job of kind of unfolding all the faces from the face that you've unwrapped perfectly. All right. Hey, thanks, Basic Panther. Yeah, we'll see if this is my first stream, so we'll see if I can keep it up, and yeah, if I can keep it interesting. This first stream in particular, I was trying to choose something that like would be, I don't know, would be interesting to watch, I guess, that I feel like I can make progress on quickly, but I already feel like I'm going so slow, so I'm doing my best. maybe I'll get better at it. All right, so now I'm going to export this back, and I have all these facets, so I'm just going to smooth, and now everything's all smooth, of course, but now it's too smooth because you can see this like horrible shading artifact right here because it's smoothing around to the back face there. And the way to solve that is usually to do support loops. At least if you're making like a high-end PC game, you usually do these things called support loops, which is where you just add another edge loop right there and add one right here. You basically put loops all around the edges, and it seems really wasteful because it's like, what? This didn't even change the shape of the object, but it will. So if I hop back into Unity, you can see that it did tame that shading right now, and it didn't make a super hard edge. So it's a really nice shading fade on the corner, and it just costs a couple extra polygons, and it can get really expensive, especially if you're doing it on a lot of really small stuff. But this planner is quite big, so something like this is totally appropriate, I think, especially for like a PC game or Xbox or PlayStation. Okay, so I'm just putting support loops on all of my edges. Oops. Okay, and the mud in the middle is really, really flat. So I'm just going to drag this edge loop down a bit on the side. And here's another cool part about follow active quads. Like, I messed up those UVs because I pulled them and they stretched a little. It's not really a big deal. Probably nobody would ever notice. But if you just reproject the follow active quads, it'll fix that, which is sweet. Okay, so my mud is very, very flat. And I just want to add a little bit of wave to it so that it looks like something organic is in here. And I'll add maybe another couple edge loops in the middle here. Oops, select this ring faces and try to give it a little like bulge so that it actually looks like the mud is kind of piled up in there. Okay. And I'll do also that to the edges. All right. So for anyone who's new in the stream, what I'm doing is I am making a planter for this rather large city that I've been working on. And I'm trying to fill out some space in this really big walkway that doesn't have anything in it. Planners are a really, really, really good thing to fill out cities because they're relatively easy. They fill up the space and make the city feel full, like architecturally, but they don't require any, you don't have to, like if you make a new building, okay, well that's a building that the player might expect to be able to go in. And then if they can go in it, then you got to fill it with stuff. And if you got to fill it with stuff, okay, do you have enough stuff? Then you got to make more stuff. So sometimes that can just be a really cascading avalanche of work. But planners are really cool because they fill up space, they look great, and they don't have to do anything. They just look pretty, and no player questions, you know, the pointlessness of the object because it's just going to look pretty. And it works especially well for this game because this game's kind of a utopia and everything's really nice. So trying to make everything just feel like a really almost like a Star Trek city, but in olden times. So the people here spend a lot of time making their cities look pretty and building pointless objects that just look nice. Okay. So I've got the mud a little bit lumpy, which is cool. Now what I'm about to do may shock some of you because this is kind of old school, but it's something I do on all my props because I think it works really well, and that is Vertex Painting. So Yeah, array planters. Yeah, they're good stuff. Do not forget about them. Do not neglect the planters. All right, so I just basically paint in lighting, and that's the thing that might shock some of you, because you know, next gen game, high fidelity, you wouldn't think to like hand paint lighting. That sounds a little bit 1999, but it actually works really well, because if you like my game, I only bake lighting for interiors. If I were to bake lighting for everything, for every exterior object, it would probably, well, I don't know if it would ever finish, but it would probably take a week or something like that. So there's just no chance that I would be able to light map everything in my game. So pretty much every exterior object, the exterior of the buildings, the trees, the ground, the terrain, all that stuff doesn't use a light map. So, you know, light probes are not going to cut it if you want to have actual like kind of soft lighting and AO on things. Are there seasons? Would the plants in the planter grow, die? No, this game just has just night and day. So I have a I do have a weather system, but yeah, no seasons. So I just have this nice slider for night and day, and I have some rain and stuff. But yeah, they're not gonna like die and stuff. That would be cool though. That'd be really cool. Actually, this world doesn't have seasons because it's it doesn't have axial tilt. It's tidally locked with its moon, and the whole Earth and moon system just rotates around the sun, and both of them are on the same plane with the sun, and neither spin on their own axis. It's really weird and probably impossible in actual astronomy, but this world doesn't have any seasons. But that's obviously not the reason I didn't put in seasons. It's because it's too hard for me. Okay, so I'm painting this kind of darkening, and then I do it again for, I do everything where everything meets the ground. I think stuff looks really weird where it meets the ground if it doesn't have a little bit of darkening, because the well, just ambient occlusion, if you've heard of that, is just the light is bouncing around, and it's kind of not getting to the corners as much because there's not as many angles that the light can actually hit it. Yeah, that's right. Eternal spring. Yeah, like I said, this is a nice place. This is a place where everyone's happy, and things don't go wrong very often, so everything's nice here. And you can already see that, like, even in the Blender viewport, which is not ever a good gauge for how something's looking, but even in the Blender viewport, this object already has more like beef to it. It already, just painting that light on the bottom, and you'll see the difference right now. When I go into the actual game, you can see that that kind of darkening where the planter meets the ground, it just looks a lot better. And it's virtually free. I mean, Vertex, like all the vertices have RGB data anyway, so you can just put colors in them and just multiply it against the texture and the shader, and it's just one extra multiplication instruction for the GPU, and it's just nothing. I mean, we've had it since like 1990, so that's something I do. You can see that, like, this this tie-dye madness, that's because I'm actually using the RGB data in the vertices for something else. I'm not using it for lighting information. I'm using it for texture blending. So if I go to that part of the model, you can see the kind of dirty brick mixing with the clean brick, and that helps break up the tiling when you're looking at something really big like this. So I don't always use it for lighting, but if I'm not using it for anything else, then I generally use it for lighting. All right, so that was a lot of talk about vertex painting. So now would be a good time to run around the game, but I think I have a bug. Where for some reason my player isn't moving. Something is falling right there, and I don't know what it is. I have no idea what that is. something is moving right here. This is a very peculiar scene. I have no idea what's the problem here. All right, I know this is probably boring, but I'm gonna see real quick if this bug is affecting just this part of the world, or if I could be anywhere and the player still wouldn't be able to move. Yeah, it looks like I can look around, but I can't walk around, and I do not know why that is. It's very strange. Well, that sounds like it'll probably be a very boring bug to fix, and I'm not going to do that on the stream. So I'm just going to have to make do with flying around with the scene view camera. All right. So I've loaded back up the city. Oh, and if anyone's curious on how I set up any other Unity users, this is a big open world game, and what I do is I just kind of have like one persistent scene, and I call it main, and it has the terrain, it's got the lighting, it's got the sky, it's got a lot of the big stuff, and then the actual stuff is in their own little scenes on the surface. So here I'll load up another section. So now this is all loaded, and this would be happening as you walk around the world. Stuff is loading in around you, and when you're out of range, it unloads and it replaces this entire scene with what's known in the industry, in the games industry, as an imposter, which is basically just a really low poly version. It's not showing up right now because it, in the Unity editor, it doesn't happen. It only happens at runtime. That's just kind of the way I set it up. All right. Back to our planter. So now is a good time before I move forward, like putting plants in the planter is a good time to really take a look at the planter and make sure that there's nothing I want to change about it, because if I'm going to change the curvature of the planter or the placement of it or something like that, I guess the placement would be fine because I could just move all the plants with it. But certainly if I'm going to change the curvature of it, I don't really want to reposition all those plants. So just kind of want to make sure that everything's okay going forward. I'm thinking that there's a little too much lip on the planter. So I'm going to move the dirt up. Okay, I think that's probably fine. And the whole planter, I think, could be darker, like just in terms of its value. So doing some more vertex painting here. I'm kind of OCD about the values, the values of everything and their relationship to one another. I feel like that's a really important part. And when you squint your eye, you know, the value is just very, very important for interpreting the kind of shapes and the depths of the scene. So I tend to mess around with that a lot. See, that barely made a difference. Now I feel silly. That's okay. All right, so I think it's time now to put in the plants. However, there's no collision on this thing, so I'm going to make a real quick and dirty collision box. So what I'm going to do here, instead of just making a square one, since this thing's curved, it's going to need a custom collision mesh. And with my exporter, that's really simple because I can just copy this dummy object, and I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller so that I can actually select it. Because if I make it the same size, then I won't be able to select it. You can see now there's kind of a box within a box. And I'm just going to change this from LD0, and I call it Fizz. Fizz is kind of a weird name for collision. I picked it up. I don't know, that's just what everyone called it at Sucker Punch at my last job, and that's just kind of got what I got used to calling it, but I know everyone else calls it collision. Okay, so now I'm just going to duplicate the planter, and I'm going to parent it to this new like little box in the middle. And you can see now I have another planter, except that one is going to be Fizz, or collision rather. So actually I'm just going to move it all to another layer so that I can work on them separately. I don't And I was just moving it up and down there just so I could actually select it, because I wouldn't know which one I was selecting unless I moved it off. All right. So it doesn't need all of this geometry, right? It doesn't need support loops. It doesn't need this inner lip. It doesn't need any of that. It doesn't even need this. And it certainly doesn't need this edge loop. So delete that. And it doesn't need any of these either. So all those edge loops I carefully added, I'm just removing now. See, it may have been a good idea to, like, once I had the base mesh, to just use that for the collision, and then go off that and make the actual render mesh. But if I'm constantly worrying about, like, I just don't like to worry about collision too early, because I just get bogged down. I only focus on how it looks right away, and then once it looks good, well, how it looks and also how it fits into the world. In terms of like walking around it and things like that. And then I try to focus on the other stuff. And actually collision takes a very small amount of time, but it's often nonetheless something I neglect to do for a very long time. I mean, sometimes I wait like 6 months before I actually add collision on something, and playtesters are like complaining about being able to walk through one object, and it's just, I know it's such an easy fix that it doesn't register to me as something I should do, but I know it's important. People don't like to walk through stuff. All right, so this, I'm just going to give it a material called fizz, which isn't actually important. I just like to make sure that the fizz isn't linking up to some random material for some reason. And now when I press my export hotkey, then I already have the, what's it called? Shade City Planter. I already have this model in my library. Okay, it doesn't have any animation, so I'm gonna disable all this animation, which is all enabled by default. And I'm just gonna drag it right as a child, and it all lines up just fine. Okay, and I will, this is of course a mesh collider, and I'll give it a stone material, which really, that stone for this game, the stone, the actual physics material almost only matters for the footsteps. So I just want to, you know, if the player ever gets on top somehow, which hopefully they shouldn't, then it'll have the right sound. Although stone is kind of weird because you'll be technically walking on dirt. So why don't we do gravel there? Okay, and it doesn't need a mesh render because you're not supposed to see it. So there, just the collision. And that should be good. All right, and having collision on it also makes it easier to place things on it, because then you can use the Unity Control Shift thing where you put stuff on. But I'm actually not going to use that at the moment. I'm going to use a special tool I wrote. I call it the Prefab Stamper. And what I can do is I can just click on a prefab and select it. So I just find it in the, what's this called? The project view. And I can just right click on it. And I have this new little button I made called Stamp. And I click on that and it gives me like a little wizard up here. And what I can do is I can just click. Oh, I don't think it has. Oh, okay. I know what the problem is. Sometimes Unity is really bad about updating the updating your collision. So if I toggle that a couple times, maybe this will work now. Stamp. All right, that didn't work either. But you can see that it's going on the terrain, so I don't really know why it's not going. Oh, probably because that's the terrain layer. All right, none of this probably makes any sense, but nonetheless, now it should work. Okay, and this just makes it easy for me to like actually place them in here. So I don't really want to. And the other nice thing is it automatically like varies the size. And I can scroll, and that will rotate the object as well. So I'm noticing these are a little too cluttered. They look okay, but I don't think I need them that cluttered. Just seems like that might be kind of hard on performance for not that much benefit. All right. I thought about like trying to sell this prefab dabber tool. It's actually really useful. But then I thought, in the past, whenever I've made tools, I've made a couple tools, and I make them for me. Like I make them like so they work well exactly for my workflow, and they save me a lot of time, and I use them for years. But you know, they're not very flexible for other people, and they don't end up being very good for other people, because I'm not really interested in putting options in there to help other people necessarily, because I make them first and foremost to speed up my process, and they don't really turn out very well. So I've kind of given up on trying to release things tools wise, not games wise. Very interested in releasing games. All right, so I think that looks pretty cool. That definitely helps. The greenery definitely helps the monotony of this endless kind of cobble. There's still like so much to do. This endless cobble has a lot of work before it stops looking horrific. But that's a good start. I'm pleased with how that's looking. Okay. Thinking about making like a little pedestal for the planter. All right, let's do it. Quick little pedestal. Just gonna add another edge loop down here. And I'm just gonna extrude on individual normals. Okay. And it's going to be a different material, so I separated it as an object. And this is that trick I showed at the very beginning, follow active quads. It's so good, man. It works in like so many situations. Yeah, one of the tools, well, I've tried to release a couple, one of which was my Blender exporter, which works really well for me. And I actually made a YouTube video and everything, like documenting exactly how to use it and really polished and everything. I didn't put it on GitHub. I just put it on the Blender forums because I figured most people who would use it would probably just be Blender users who weren't like coders necessarily, which non-coders don't often browse around on GitHub, I guess. And I just got so many like support requests, like people asking to change things about it, and then some people like wanted help, I don't understand how to use it. And it was just like, and I was giving it away for free, and I just felt like it wasn't going to be worth my time because it wasn't really helping me. I don't know, I'm just kind of a selfish asshole, I guess. So I just kind of pulled it because I didn't want to here's what I didn't want to happen. I didn't want somebody to like get this exporter, which was like in my YouTube video that everyone could see like how to use it, and think that it was going to be useful for them, and then them to spend like an hour of their time trying to learn how to use it, and then it not work for them, because then I felt bad, like, well, crap, I just like used up an hour of their time on this tool, which I don't really support anymore because I'm not like pushing updates for it or anything. And so I just wanted to pull it. But I guess GitHub is the nature of it is kind of like download at your own risk sort of thing. So yeah, that would probably be a better place to do it. Maybe I should do that. All right, so I'm making this pedestal. We don't need bottom faces because you're never going to see those. All right, and I want this to kind of be a material contrast. So GitHub has similar problems in just the main developer not supporting it anymore, you're saying? Yeah, that I've seen that happen too. Just if the kind of main person drops out, then it just really loses steam. And sometimes, especially for like if you're trying to use an API or something that people have kind of abandoned, you can almost just waste your time trying to use it, because you have to do the legwork of learning it, and then and then you find out some roadblock is in it, and then you're not able to get a hold of the main person because they're onto other things and stuff. So yeah, sometimes I think it's best to not put it up if you're not committed to keeping it going. Yeah, that's true. Then someone can just fork it at their own risk. That's true. Yeah, I think you've convinced me a little. I'm going to think about it. All right, so I'm going to make a different material. Yeah, just make good disclaimers. By the way, is my audio okay, folks? Like, is it clipping or too quiet or anything like that? Clipping is the worst. I can't stand when people's mics are clipping. So I want to make sure that's not happening to me. Okay, cool. Sweet. All right. Let's try. This one looks pretty good. I just grabbed like a random texture. Yeah, I hear you, Black Panther. All right, so I think that looks cool. I don't know. Let's see it. See it in the engine, the only place that matters. I'm gonna pick a this trim sheet is really helpful. I got it on Game Textures, and it's one of the few, GameTextures.com that is. It's one of the few trim sheets I found on those texture sites. So in the games industry, in like 3D environment art, we make tons of these trim sheets. They're only horizontal tiling or vertical. They only tile in one direction, I'm trying to say. And they just have like samplers of different things, like different trims, like wood beams, ornamentation, or like, well, like this is just basically different blocks of stone. And you can just map so many different things to them and get so many different shapes. Like, I'll show you guys, just because it always amazes me how game texture sites never really have anything like this. But I'll show you guys what kind of crazy stuff you can do with a trim sheet like that. So I'm going to show you a building here. This building, like the whole ceiling, I totally just had like a bunch of trim sheets that I had made for other stuff, and I just started like extruding a bunch of edge loops up, and then just mapped every edge loop to like a different pattern, and it just looked insane. It was like, whoa, like I would never like design something like that from the ground up. that kind of complexity. You know, that would just take forever if you were just doing like something specifically for this. But when you already have the trim sheets that you've kept them organized and kept them well named and all that, you can just grab them and then just map a bunch of rings of polygons to them and get all these crazy shapes. And that is how a lot of the architecture in this game is embellished, kind of. All right, that is the end of my trim sheet rant. Okay, back to the planner. So I put this little pedestal thing on the bottom. Trying to find the right balance of like how many stones to do, because I don't want it to look too busy. I think that's okay. Okay, now it needs the material trim 3. I think it's called trim 3. It looks like it's already in my. Actually, what's trim 3A? Let's try that. Maybe that's cool. So I exported it and I'm not really seeing it. I think that it's probably underground. Yeah, there it is. All right, so I'm going to grab all of these plants and just put them in the. Actually, you know, I'll call this city planter, and then I'll just put this in there. Now I can actually move this around. Oh, you know, that has a terrible pivot. My bad. All right. Call this one city planner. Put all this crap in. Okay, now I can move it around. Ah, yes. So this is the same texture, but I put a mask on it that like alternates the color, which looks kind of cool. I think that might look a little bit too like traffic, like road traffic-y, so I don't think that's gonna work. But that's another cool trick. Okay, I'll check the chat. Oh yeah, thanks for reading that forest write-up. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of things about game forests that people don't really talk about, or just a lot of things about making fake forests that people don't really talk about. People always talk about textures and draw calls and normal maps and such, and I just feel like there's not enough love given to the really basic parts, like how dense should your tree count be and stuff like that. I feel like that stuff's really important. So how have you had any luck kind of using the knowledge on a 2D game? Oh, Twister Ghost. Oh, cool. Hey. I just connected the person. That's cool. Yeah, that can be tough. You can only get so far. I used to teach a 3D class, and I felt like everyone really cared a lot about assets, and I always felt like the placement of the assets were more important than the actual assets. But I think that's because since I'm a 3D artist, my assets aren't usually that bad, so I don't really have to deal with bad assets much. But just having downloaded a couple things like off the asset store and trying to make do with them, the assets are definitely important. It's just everything's important: the placement, the assets, everything. All right. So these support loops are like probably too fat on this. I'm spending way too much time on this planner, by the way. This is like not the best use of development time. Okay, that's enough. Delete those edge loops. Oh, I messed up my UVs. Sweet. Follow active quads. Now your game is top down, yeah? So Twister Ghost, the game you're making is a top-down 2D game. Is that right? I think that's the one. Yeah, so I think that makes things even harder, especially for trees, because like the shape of, well, just the forms of everything when you're straight on top down, it makes it way easier for like designing environments and areas and stuff. But I think it does make it harder for like pulling off a tree because you can't see the trunk or anything. So if it was like 3/4, you could see the trunk, but yeah, it can. But I thought your trees, I could definitely tell they were trees, which is good. That's the first step. Yeah, I can imagine that would be really rough. Okay, the base of this is way too bright. It's like popping out at me. That's what I'm talking about. I was talking earlier about just, I'm really like OCD about the values of things. And this is one of those situations where like, I could never ship that. That would bother me a lot. Just seeing how bright that base is like, it just pulls the eye right to it. And that's just something I got to darken. So Vertex Painting to the rescue here. Oh, here's a cool trick. If I add 2 edge loops. Oh, whoops. So got to get this bottom one close to the ground. I can select those 2 loops of faces, and then I can fill them with black, and then I can go back and delete the edge loop. And now I get a perfect like vertex fade, which makes the whole thing darker and also adds a little bit of shading. It's a little bit strong, so I'm gonna have to blur it a little bit. Okay. There, now that's not popping out quite so badly. It's still too bright though. Still too bright. Oh, peace out, Twister. Okay. So I'm gonna make it a little bit darker because I still thought it was a little bit too bright, which it looks really dark in Blender. But see, that's why you can't ever trust what it looks like in your 3D program, because It's not how it's gonna look in the game. I'm clicking like mad. I wonder if the mic can pick that up. It's just like popcorn clicking. Is that even darkening? Okay, we got to make sure that this is actually working now. Green. Yeah, okay, it's working. Sanity check there. Okay. A little bit darker. One shade darker. And then I gotta move on from this planner. Okay, see now that I don't know if you guys can see that, but that value being fixed now just looks so much better to me. Doesn't pop out anymore like an eyesore. Okay. So cool. You know, I'm thinking that this planter overall might be a little bit big compared to the size of the lady standing right here. Okay, scaling that down a little. I think that's better. But now it's almost like, now it's the right height, but I feel like the planner should be wider now. Oh dear. Maybe not. Doublesies? That's probably not going to work. Okay. I think that if I don't make this planner wider, I'm going to hate myself forever. Every time I look at that planner, so. Grab all this stuff. I'll just kind of do this the sloppy way. Just yank it out. Okay, and then I will grab these faces, grow the selection a couple times. Oh, so if anyone was around when I was talking about edge loops, one downside to edge loop or I'm sorry, not edge loops, support loops for the shading. Once you add them, they look nice, but they can make it a little bit hard to edit your mesh. If you need to make big changes to the mesh, like once you have all those extra loops in there, it can get a little bit hairy, but in this case, it's going to be just fine, I think. Just yank this whole thing out. The planner's a little bit bigger, and I will just move this out as well. Okay, and I'll grab all of it. And I'm just scaling it up to give it a little bit of give. Of course, now the UVs are stretched, so I use my, well, actually for this, I can just grab the whole thing and unwrap it, and that'll just fix everything. Rescale it. Okay. And I follow active quads again to fix the stretching that I've just created. And I'll do the same thing for the bottom trim, follow active quads, and that rescales all of the UVs. Okay. I think that's probably okay. Now the planter's a little wider, and I think I'll just have to stagger these plants out a little more to fill it up. Still getting a little thin at the end. That's okay. Okay. Now I think we need a little bit more thickness to it in terms of the actual foliage coverage. All right. I think that looks pretty good. I really wish I could walk around. I can't believe I was like trying to make sure everything was good before going into the stream. Like I was like ready to actually make progress. So I didn't even press Control P to actually jump into the game and see if there were any bugs with the actual character. I think that'd be pretty boring if I tried to debug that. All right. That planter's a little wider. Ah, collision. We gotta widen the collision too, which is nowhere to be found. What happened to it? Ah. Huh. It's quite a mystery. There it is. There, okay. My exporter has a bug where sometimes it moves things to origin, but only, it doesn't actually move them, it just looks like it did. And the second you try to move it, it'll pop back to where it ought to be. Okay. All right, so that should be good. Re-export. Okay. So my next task I wanted to do, and I don't know how far I'll get with this, but my next task was just to grab one of these buildings and start arting it out, start actually making it into a building. I figured I'd go with this one I have right here selected because this one's already kind of halfway, and I felt like it would be more fun to actually watch one come from basically nothing. So my plan for this building is I want this to be like a really cool stone bridge, and I want this building to be kind of, this is my idea for the bridge. This is like a stone arch bridge in Oxford University, linking these two buildings, and I wanted something kind of like that. Of course, in my case, one side will be higher, so the whole thing will be skewed. Here's another example of a really cool stone bridge connecting buildings. I feel like those are so cool, and there's just not that many of them. But my plan for the building itself is kind of this more Middle Eastern looking design. I want it to be Romanesque in its arches, like rather than pointed arches, these round arches, and I want it to have kind of some of these cool designs on it. And I want to also copy the language of this building a little bit. Since they're connected by the bridge, I feel like they should have similar language. Right before the stream, I actually had this building in where this building was, and I was just thinking about it and trying to do a lot of design work and plan what I was going to do with it. And I decided there was just no way that a stone building with a stone bridge was going to look good connected to a wood framed building with a plaster second story. It just wasn't going to work. I knew that it would just look really wrong. It's things like that that, you know, you can try to plan things as much as you can, and then you run into something like that and you've done so much work. Like, I was pretty committed to the placement of this big building before I moved it and made this other new block in. And it's just so hard to pull the Band-Aid off, because you know it's not going to work, you know it's going to be bad, you know it's going to be wrong, but you're only like 20% in. You still have most of the work to go. So, you know, better tear everything up now and fix it as early as possible, and just kill your bad ideas. It's really hard to do that. My sometimes I can't. My girlfriend is also an artist, and sometimes she's not as attached to things if I'm building them, so she can sometimes help me, tell me like, no, that's not going to work, you're gonna have to change it. And it's just so hard. But you know, if she really puts her foot down about it, then I know it's something that I'm not able to see because I'm too subjective about it. So that it can be really helpful to have someone like that. All right, so this building. So at the beginning of this stream, I kind of talked about how I keep I try to keep lots of things in each Blender file that are kind of related to each other. So now I am going to open my Blender file, which is for all the buildings of this city, which is called Shade City Structures. So I try to keep like all the interiors. You can see how far I got this bridge right here. This is actually the bridge I had before. It's kind of a wooden bridge, and it was the sky bridge here. And it looks so wrong. I don't know how I made that mistake, because it's a wooden bridge. You can't have a wooden bridge going into a stone building. It just looks so weird. So I'm gonna can it. I'll probably never use that thing. Okay. Let's see. All right, so I'm gonna go on a fresh layer and I'll make a new empty object, which is the way I separate all my props. Oops, getting some feedback there. I parent a bunch of stuff to an empty object, and then my exporter, that's how it knows which stuff to group together into a single mesh. All right, so new empty cube. And I'll call this, I don't know. It's kind of like a stone box. I'll call it the bridge building. Bridge building 1, LD0. I call it LD0 because that's LOD 0. And if I call it LOD 0, like LO, if I put an O in there, Unity will like get its grubby hands on there and like try to like hook all the LODs up for me, and that messes up some prefabs for me sometimes. So I call everything LD instead of LOD. Okay, so the first thing I have to do is replace my block in with an actual like prop, with like an actual model. So I'm just gonna get a box, and the goal is to just get it in the engine right away. So get to the very most basic. This is just a rough guess because I have no idea how big it's going to be. Well, I guess I do just because I could measure it out, but for me it's easier just to put it in and then just change it after it's in because my exporter is so fast. I think it's probably going to be a brick building because the other one's a brick building, so put brick 1 on there. And I'm actually gonna, this is gonna make no sense to anyone, but I need to make it blue. Well, I guess some people might get it. I need to make it blue because the shader that this uses is a vertex blend shader, and the blue channel is like the like clean brick layer, so to speak. Okay. Export that. What did I call it? Bridge building, bridge building. Okay. And take off the animations because I do not want those. This is a building. Hey, actually that scale was remarkably close. That is really weird. I totally guessed that scale. Oh. Okay. Strange. Okay. Hello, really lucky. We are making this so I have this city here. This is the biggest city in the game, and it's really early right now. It's like a bunch of block-in stuff. Most of the buildings are block-ins. This building right here is like probably 20% of the way done because it has windows and stuff. But most of the buildings look like this, just big boxes and spheres and whatnot. And so right now I'm just taking this box and trying to put some windows in it and start to make it look like an actual building. So that is what we are doing right now. And currently I have the block in, which is just made out of like basic Unity geometry. And I'm replacing it with like an actual model. So I'm just messing with the proportions of the model until they roughly match the block in. And then I can start putting windows and stuff. All right, get this thing on the ground. Okay. So here's my box. I'm just going to go into solid view for now. Okay, getting the height right. Actually, the height was pretty much randomly chosen anyway, so. See, I always do that. I always just like commit to my first, just my first gut, my first gut decision. And I forget that like that decision wasn't really a carefully thought out decision. That was just the first thing I did. So you shouldn't commit to things. All right. So it actually wasn't even on the ground. Getting the height right. Back and forth, back and forth. I don't do this much back and forth, but just to get the general dimensions right, I do. Okay, now I want to see what actual side of the building I'm even looking at. So to do that, I'm just gonna like poke a hole in the mesh. Looks like, all right, looks like that. I'll just get that side. Okay. Now I know which side is the front and which side is the back of the building while I'm working. Okay. It's a little bit wider. A little bit wider. Okay. So that's pretty good rough proportions. Now I'll put that big ball on the top. So I'll do a sphere, UV sphere. And now the most difficult decision in all of game development. How many subdivisions do you put on your sphere? That's the golden question. I'm just going to leave it whatever it is. It's a pretty big sphere, so it's like the whole top of this building. Kind of looks like an observatory now. Oops, I forgot to parent it to the empty object. All right, so these I don't need anymore because now I have the block in, or in like mesh form. Okay. Now, I think I want to put this building aligned with that bridge, and just because that bridge is aligned with that window, so I don't really want to make this weird skewy bridge to go to the building. See, something like this takes like 3 seconds, but this could have disastrous consequences like 20 hours from now when I'm, half a work week away when I've built this entire building, and I realize that the bridge is just kind of weird and off. That can be pretty frustrating sometimes. Okay. I think this building needs to be, see, I don't really like it over here, but that's just where the bridge lines up. So I guess the other choice I have would be to rotate this inner part. I don't know if I want to do that. I think I'm going to have to. Okay. Now, does that mess anything up? Let's go to this seam. No, it doesn't really mess anything up. And mess anything up at the bottom. No, it looks like we're fine. We can rotate this thing freely. So I'm just going to rotate it a little so that we can move the bridge over. By the way, for me, this is one of the hardest parts of the whole process of making, especially architecture, because I kind of get paralyzed by how many decisions there are. But once I have this stuff figured out, and I'm just like cutting in windows and putting in trims and things like that, things are a lot more easygoing. When I'm at the stage of like polish, and putting in windows and trims and glass and things like that, I can usually even like listen to a podcast because it uses so little brain power for me at this point. But these kinds of decisions are important. Okay. So I want this bridge to go right in the center of the building so that I can have a nice even sized window on each side, I guess. All right, there we go. So I put this material on brick 1, and it doesn't have any UVs at the moment. So now I'm deciding whether I should cut a hole for the bridge and how I should do that. Yeah, I think I'll start by extruding that bridge out. Okay. So even edge loops, and then we'll extrude a bridge out right here. Should be on the right side because we cut that hole, so we know where the front is. Okay. Get it the right length first. It's about the right length, I think. A little bit shorter than that. And now let's get it the right tallness. All right. So see, if I just move this face up right here, then I'm going to get this nonsense, which is not really what I want, because when I start cutting windows and things, I want to make sure I have clean edge loops to start with if I can. Okay, let's move that up. I think that's probably good. Move that a little bit lower. By the way, this whole process of these basic shapes with this bridge and everything, this all took me a really long time. They're just boxes, but it took me a long time because I really deliberated over the layout of the city a lot, and I really tried to get a good feel. See, a lot of these are block-ins, but I feel like the city on the whole already kind of has a good read. And I think you want to try to get that with just the boxes, because if you can get it with just the boxes, then you are in good shape, because you've got the big forms, the big layout, the big composition, the overall feel of the space and the scale of everything. If that is all working, then it's just going to be that much better once you add all of the, you know, all of this nonsense, the moldings and the trims and the windows and the plants and the planters and the yada yada yada. Okay. A little shorter. Nope, too short. Okay. Back and forth, back and forth. All right, now it's too wide. So I'm going to grab these. I'll grab these on the top, grab these on the back, and I'll just scale them all in, make it a little bit skinnier. I think that's okay. I'll just do the slightest hair skinnier. That will never matter. That was a very small amount. Okay, that's good. I feel like we can delete this bridge now. So now we've gotten a little bit closer. We've got the actual model in the place where it should be. Now let's get the pitch of the bridge right, going up to that window. Okay. All right, now is a good time to look at reference. Another thing I spent a lot of time doing, probably for an hour or two before the stream, because I figured it'd be, again, really boring. See, so many parts of, even of game art, which is obviously the most visual part of game dev usually, there's just so many things that wouldn't stream well. Like I was just looking through Google Images, trying to put together a small reference folder. I feel like you don't want too much reference because then you just have too many different ideas. But I've got this pretty concise little folder of, I just want this bridge and I want kind of a boxy building with these kinds of windows and those kinds of trims. And I have everything I need here, all the parts and pieces, and I have good reference for each one. But I spent a lot of time compiling these and picking the right ones and making design decisions about how I want it to look. Right now, one of my biggest worries, which I'm just kind of going forward with and hoping for the best, is that this building is wood and plaster and cobblestone first floor. And this building to the left is going to be brick, and it has a much more Eastern look to it. This building looks fairly Western with the way its roofs are and everything. And this one is with the kind of spherical, the dome roof and everything, is going to look a bit more Eastern. And I'm a little worried that those are not going to look good together, that it's going to look a little bit too like hodgepodge collage-y. But I was consoled by the fact that Oxford, the college that this bridge is from, has a lot of architectural elements that are just not present in the buildings around. I did a little bit of walking around on Google Maps, and if Oxford can pull it off and look as amazing as it does, I think this city should be able to as well. So I'm hoping for the best on that. Okay, back to my reference. What was I doing? I was looking at what to do next. I think I'm going to start carving the bridge because that's just a really big silhouette piece right now. yeah, I'm going to start carving the bridge right after I put some brick texture on it, because that is an eyesore how it is. Okay. Unwrap one face. Put it to brick. We'll go into texture mode. And follow active quads, my best friend. And try to get the scale of the brick right off the bat. This is another way I work that some environment artists work this way, but some of them do it more orderly. I like to texture while I'm modeling. Some people like to model the whole thing and then texture the whole thing. And I think texturing while you're modeling is a good way to do it. Yeah, I have a lot to say about that, but I want to keep the building going. Okay. So the bricks were a little bit big. Still a little bit big, so let's get Rania over here. Is her name. It's a scale reference. So those are pretty, you can imagine how big those bricks would be next to Rania. That would be like a brick the size of your torso or something. So a little bit smaller still. And they're going to be a little bit big just because, you know, obviously the bigger the scale of the texture, or rather the higher the frequency of the texture, the worse the tiling is. This particular brick texture, though, tiles really well. I made it a long time ago, I think probably like 5 years ago. And I don't really like it, but it looks really bad up close, but it looks good from the far, especially once I start doing the vertex painting. It reads well, so I've just kept it because I'm a big read kind of person, which bites me sometimes because sometimes my stuff looks bad up close, but that's just what's important to me, I guess. It's how it looks kind of when you squint your eyes. Okay, I'm gonna go with that. Yeah, I'm gonna go with that. Okay, now I said I'd start doing the bridge, so let's look at this reference, and I guess I'll start with the curvature. So let's go with the curvature. I'm gonna break this piece off. Oops, I lost my stream chat. Okay. I'm going to break this piece off, and I'm going to delete this face, because what's going on here? Why can't I get that face? Oh, whoops, I didn't bring it with when I broke it off. Okay, we're good now. And the curvature. So now I'm going to put my reference on the other monitor so I'm not constantly putting it over my stream, but I'm going to pay close attention to it because I'm not a stonemason, and I think it's important to just make sure you're not doing anything that is unnatural, and I think it's really hard to do that unless you're paying close attention to the reference. Unless, like I said, if you're a stonemason, then by all means go ahead, but if you're not, then usually paying close attention to the reference is a good idea if you're trying to do like actually no, not even if you're trying to do a realistic, just any style, if you want it to be as believable as possible, even if it's heavily stylized. Having just a good knowledge of the source material or knowing when to rely on reference is prudent. All right. So the bottom of this bridge is arched more than the top. And in fact, the top is almost flat. Yeah, actually, I think it is flat. So I'm going to take out, I'm going to make it, move these down. Until it's a bit more flat. Okay, that looks flat enough for me. Okay, let's take a look at that. Cool. So the bridge looks a little fat to me right now. It's kind of a pretty beefy bridge. I mean, if this is just a walkway between two buildings, I wouldn't expect the bridge to be, you know, you could fit like 10 people abreast in there or something. So I think I'm gonna make it a little bit skinnier. Again, this is one of those good things to do early on. I know it's making this early process probably seem really grueling to watch because it's just so slow. And so little is getting done because it's just so blocky still. But I think it's important to spend the time here. I said a little earlier in the stream that I tend to go a lot faster once these decisions are made, and I can just kind of work on putting trims and things like that, detail things. Okay, snapping those to make sure they line up. All right, so that's a little bit better. I think that's better. And by the time we add the walls and everything, there'll be a little less space in there. And in games, you generally want to give more space than reality. I think it makes people sick if you have really tight spaces. I mean, in real life, you know, you have this kind of sense of where all your limbs are. But in a game, when you're walking around and things are really tight, you're just not, you know, you get stuck on tables and walls and things. So I think it's always better to give a little bit too much space. And I'm definitely guilty of not giving people enough space because sometimes I adhere to real world sizes too much. All right, that thing is really blocky, so we need a couple more edge loops in there, I think. So I'll do bevel. Bevel. See if that's smooth enough. Okay, I think that's pretty good. All right, back to my reference. So the windows are, see, these are important things. The arch is flat, well, until it gets to the peak here. And the bottoms of the windows do not adhere to the arch. They're just kind of straight, but the windows themselves are skewed. You can see that the top of the column here, this column piece, is higher on one side than it is on the other. So these are arched windows, which are perfectly skewed. They're not arched. Arched windows in an arched arrangement are pretty difficult to build. So I can see why they're skewed, but skewed ones are pretty hard too, and actually they're going to be a little bit annoying to model right now. And now I'm thinking about the best way to do them. The best way to punch holes into this thing. I think that the best way to do this is to actually just do it outside of the model. Oops. And then skew it to fit into the model. Pretty sure that's going to be the easiest way to do it. Okay. So we'll just put this on. We'll get, we'll make it blue, and we will put our brick on it, and we'll put our brick material on it, and we'll give it a quick unwrap to start off. And we'll start with just an arch. So I'm going to just grab a cylinder. Doink. Okay. It's probably enough subdivisions. Oops. All right, rotate it 90 degrees, which in Blender you can just type in the number, which is really nice. seconds. I think I'll actually just keep the reference on this monitor because then you guys can see when I'm looking at it, when I'm, you know, just being silent, so you know what I'm doing. Okay. I can't even tell you how much more nerve-wracking this feels doing it in front of in front of people. All right. I'm saying all right about 12 times a minute. It's not good. So I'm just building, right now I'm building the trim around the window. And once we have the trim around the window, we can actually really roughly chop holes, and the trim will cover the super rough hole in the mesh. I think you guys will see what I mean when I get there. So Blender has a modifier called solidify, and that will just give it thickness. Okay, and I'm just going to apply that because I don't really need to do anything else with that. And I'm going to give this the brick diffuse and the brick material. Okay, and I am going to make it blue. All right, back to my reference. Okay, I know just what to do now. I didn't want brick on it. That was a mistake. I actually wanted trim. So earlier in my stream, I don't know how many of you are still around from when I said this, but I have this trim sheet that is really, really useful. And if you're a 3D artist and you do 3D stuff, I really recommend putting like useful horizontally tiling trims, just stacking a bunch on a sheet, and then you could always just grab that sheet whenever you want to spruce up your building, and you can map like rings of loops to them, and you can make cool designs. Like I'll show you what I mean. You can't really, it's so low contrast because it's blue. I'm actually going to make it white, so I'm going to have to make it blue again, but it's just so you guys can see what I mean by this. So you can just get one face and then follow active quads, which is a really useful tool. And now we have all of them like this. And you can see I didn't even do anything. All I did was unwrap it, and I just put it on in it, and you can already get designs just by moving it around. I mean, look at that. Like that already has obviously the edge loops you would need to put to make them straight because the UVs get all wonky right there. But yeah, you can just get really cool designs, and then you could make like a cut, and then you could grab these rings, and then you could map these to something else, and then you could get, you know, you get a lot of complexity. It could look like you really made a fancy like archway here, and you really didn't do anything. You just mapped it to different parts of the trims, which can result in some pretty cool stuff. Okay, back to actually looking at the reference though. So I'm going to take this one, take that edge loop out, and I'm going to make kind of a column on each side. So this part and this part, I guess I can just separate those, and I will put a cube at the top of each one. to get a cube. I'm not actually going to add a cube because then I have to like move it into position and stuff. So I'm just going to grab this face and then I'm just going to duplicate it, duplicate the face, move the face, scale the face, and then extrude. And then I basically just have a cube and I don't need to like position it or anything. It's already in the right place for me, which is something I really love about Blender. It's really fast and easy to duplicate stuff off in Blender and then make it into a different piece, so you're not constantly having to add new primitives. I guess you can do that in any 3D program, but I've always been able to do it a lot faster with Blender. All right, I'm going to delete this side because I can just mirror it. And in fact, I can delete this as well. Okay, now I'm going to combine these again so they're one object, and I can just mirror. There we go, and now I can just work on one side. Okay, back to my reference. Okay. All right. So I'm going to map this to one of these. I just can't decide which one. So here's a really useful trick. I call it wiffle waffling. I don't know what everyone else calls it, but you can see that if you wanted to map these polygons in the UV editor right here, if you wanted to map them to one part of this trim sheet, you wouldn't be able to because it's too big. Like, you can make it really small, but then you get really low texel density, which you don't really want. So you can just fold the UVs back on themselves by just scaling in the Y to -1 and then just moving it down. And basically you've kind of folded like a little hot dog bun of the UVs. And now you get good texel density and it all fits onto one thing. Okay. Now I'm going to unwrap these little cubes at the top here. Oh, that's cool. I like that. I think that works well. Little ornamentation. And then I'll grab this, which is almost already unwrapped correctly, but there, that's better. And I'm going to do that same trick, the wiffle waffle. Oops, scaled it wrong. Scale on the Y to -1 and move it down to the bottom. Okay. And to get rid of this UV skewing, I could put a bunch of extra edge loops, but in this case, I think it's going to be really easy to just move the UVs so that they line up with the cuts on the texture, and that gets rid of all of the UV skewing. Okay, now we have an arch. And we want to make it smaller because there's going to be a couple on this bridge face. I want to make sure this plane that I've started is the right dimensions. So I'm just going to really line it up. I don't know if it's hard to see what I'm doing with all this blue. I can see it. I don't know if the stream can. Maybe I should make it white. Okay. I think those are the right dimensions here. And we want to fit, this one's got 7. I don't know, it's not really important. We don't have to copy the number. but let's see. There's also a Blender modifier called the array, I think it's called. Oh dear. Oh yeah. And you can, instead of copying it a bunch of times, which works just fine, you can just use the array one. And that just helps you mess with the spacing, so you don't have to constantly go back and readjust everything. You can just mess with the spacing and the offset. I think that'll probably work. Okay, back to the reference. I don't know why I close it. I'm not done with it. Yeah, I think 5 is the right amount here. All right, now I'm going to convert these to mesh so that it gets rid of all their modifiers and stuff. And the reason I'm going to do that is because now I'm going to attach it. Actually, now would be a good time to put more trims and stuff. So my plan is to build up the entire side of this bridge straight, because everything's easier to work with when it's straight on like this rather than doing it all at a skew. And then I'm going to skew it to match the curvature of the bridge, if that makes sense. Hello, Arnis Sklev. Yeah, I'm making a game. It's called Eastshade. And this is the largest city in the game. And it's pretty early right now. I've got a lot of buildings blocked in, and I am blocking in this one right here, this big, bright white one. Or rather, I'm arting out the block in of it. Okay. So now I'm going to start cutting holes for all of these windows. Oh, thank you, Minerva. Okay. So we've got some basic holes. And now I'm just going to do really rough cuts. So you can just really roughly cut these things, because the trim is going to cover up all of that like really rough, the really rough edge of the hole you made. So that's why most of the windows in Eastshade, or in really any game I've ever worked on, we put trim around the windows just to make it a lot easier to cut holes. There are some windows which don't have trims, and it's actually a really cool look, but it makes it hard. I'll show you. Like, I've got one in National Park. So I'm loading in another scene from the game right now. Okay. And these windows are actually just cut into the plaster, and then they have the windowsill inside of them, and they have a really crude look to them, and it definitely makes it look like a storybook house. And that's really, really important to the look of the building, is the trim of the windows, and if they're on the outside or if the windowsill is inset. I feel like that's such a little thing that matters to me a lot, at least in architecture. Okay, let me read some chat. Drewhu. Yeah, so I don't have to follow the reference, certainly not, but I think that the skewed windows are going to be important to the look of the bridge in this case. I think that if I just offset the windows like this, or I have the array modifier, so, oh, I already applied it, but if I just like offset the windows, you know, move some of them up like that and move the other ones down, I think it would look like a stair, like stair-steppy, because you would see the like that with the windows, and it's an idea though. It could work. Could work. But I'm gonna go for the skew thing. All right, so cutting all these holes now. Doink. I think it'll be pretty easy too to skew them once this is all crafted. Need music. I don't know. I'm new to Twitch, and I've tried to find the answer as to whether people like music or not. And or are you asking like need music for the game? Like, do I need a composer? Thank you very much, Johu. Appreciate that. Oh, no, we have a composer. Are you a composer, Arnisklev? Ah, cool. Cool. All right, I'm trying to get a trim going here. So I'm going to put a trim under the windows because I think that'll look cool. And I'm going to put one at the very top of the bridge as well. Oops, had vertex snapping on. Okay, I have to imagine that the blue is hard for you guys to see. Now you can actually see the trim. Okay. Down, vertex snap. Select these two edges and press F. Okay. Now we've got kind of a trim at the bottom, and we'll use our handy dandy trim sheet. We'll just unwrap one polygon, follow active quads. And we want trim 3. Trim 3, okay. And let's give this a cool trim. That one doesn't look too good. I think we need, yeah, I think we need one that doesn't have any breaks in it. So here's another situation where this this bit of polygons is just too big. It's too fat for this part of the trim. So I'm going to use the old wiffle waffler, which is where I fold the UVs back on themselves. All right, I think that looks pretty cool. This trim is looking pretty cool. And now I can just copy it up to the top. I'll make it a little bit heftier up near the top. Okay, and I'll also make it kind of beveled outward like this. Okay, I think we're getting close. So I'm going to combine these things onto this sheet, onto this plane here. Now we have a nice, simple, easy mesh here where we could skew this whole thing. So there's a lot of ways to skew it. I could use a lattice. I could just use like a box lattice and move up one side. That would work fine. But setting up a lattice, oops, I just hit some button that just destroyed my, I don't even know what that was. Setting up a lattice takes a long time in Blender, which is kind of annoying because I really like lattices. So another thing we can do, which one may not have thought of, is use the proportional editing and set the fall off to linear, and then just start moving and just scroll this up. This is kind of a crazy way to do it, but it's going to work just fine. And now, so you see, we've skewed the entire thing perfectly, and it's fine. And that works well. And the skew looks like it's about the right pitch. It looks like I could go a little bit more. Okay. Work that in there. I'm going to move them all away from the pivot. And then I'm going to set a mirror modifier. Okay, and now we can, I want this to be right in the middle, perfectly exactly in the middle of the bridge. So to do that, I can just grab one of these. I just put an edge loop right here. And then I can say snap cursor to selected. Snap cursor to active. That's what it's called. It didn't do it. Oh dear. Snap cursor to, oh, it was to selected. Okay, I was right the first time. And then we can set the origin to the 3D cursor, and now this object is perfectly positioned in the middle of this bridge, and all we need to do is move one side in, and we're just clamping down perfectly on this bridge, and that's working real well. Okay. So this bottom part is a bit too beefy. Definitely got some weird garbage in the, it's kind of strange that this edge loop is not going all the way through. That means something is messed up with the mesh. We will find out, I'm sure, someday when it comes back to bite us. But right now I'm just not going to worry about it. Okay. That's cool. And then we don't really need this inner bridge part anymore. All we need is the bottom. We need the bottom because we're going to make another trim out of it. I like to put trims on my trims and then put some trims on those. Yeah, we just need the bottom. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut this guy in half. And it already has a good, that pivot's kind of ridiculous actually because it's way over there. I'm just going to move, snap the cursor to the selected, set the origin to the cursor, You would think I would hotkey those because I do use them a lot, but I don't know. I just type it in every time like a crazy person. Okay. I was beveling that because it just looked a little bit, these look a little bit faceted for my tastes. Okay, getting close. Now we will mirror. And now what we can do is we can just put an edge loop here. Grab this, and I'm just going to extrude and move on individual normals. Okay. Now we have a beautiful trim at the bottom. Let's look at the reference. Yeah, theirs is fatter. I like that. I don't have to copy it, but sometimes if theirs already looks good, then sometimes it's just safest to try to capture what they captured, and the little things matter a lot, like the thicknesses of things, the proportions of things. They are huge. Don't fool yourself into thinking that well, I'm telling you guys not to fool yourself. I fool myself all the time in thinking that something doesn't matter, like the thickness of something or the width of something, and it just does. It's those little things that really make up the form. It's the little things like, normal map bevels and really tiny little things that don't matter when you step back and look at it. Okay, but kind of paradoxically, those little normal map doodad things are the time-consuming part. But they have their place too, I understand. Sorry, I get a little bit preachy when I'm talking about the width of trims, I guess. Okay, I'm going to separate that out, and I'm going to give it a trim texture and a trim material, and just unwrap one face and Control L to select the linked and the follow active quads. Hi, a plethora. Yeah, I have enabled, hopefully it works. I set it to auto archive. This is actually my first stream ever, so I don't have any. I've never done it before. So that's why you can't find any. And my plan is, if the archiving thing works, to put them onto YouTube after that. It's kind of long-winded. I guess I've been going for a while now. But yeah, put them onto YouTube so that other people can watch them, if anyone else is interested. I also have a couple of videos on the Eastshade Studios YouTube channel of where they're actual tutorials. I pretty much am doing what I'm doing, except, well, I record the whole video and I'm just modeling, I'm not talking, and then I go back and speed it up and cut it up, and then I talk over the top of it. And that makes it really, you can get the same amount of information in 10 minutes, but it takes me forever. It takes me 2 days to edit down one of those videos. Well, probably not 2 days, but a work day. So they just take me so long. I thought, well, if I could just stream it and be done. I mean, I'm working anyway, then, and I actually like to, sometimes talking out loud can help me work. So I thought maybe the streams would be a good idea. Very interesting. Oh, thank you. I'm flattered. Well, we'll see if I can keep it up. All right. I think I'm going to put, I really like that. I don't think we need any breaks, brick, stone breaks in the bottom trim. So So this one is got some blue on it. I don't think we need that. So if anyone's wondering why I make some things blue and some things white and some things blue, and I'm always adjusting the vert colors, it's because some of my shaders are Vertex blend shaders and some of them are not. They don't use the Vertex information. Well, they use the Vertex information, they just multiply the color. So like this one is like a Vertex blend shader. So I know that if I just leave it white, it'll look really weird when I bring it in for the first time. So I just instinctively know which textures go to which shader. I mean, I've been working on this game for 4 years and I'm just coloring things before I even bring them in the first time, which is kind of confusing, but you can just disregard the weird, wacky, clown-like colors of all my stuff in here. Okay. Follow active quads, my very favorite tool. Are there any other Blender users in watching this right now? No other Blender users, huh? Anyone using Unity? Or learning Unity or anything like that? Oh, cool. Are you making a 2D game or a 3D game? Oh, cool, Basic Panther. Are you liking it? So have you ever used any other 3D applications, or is Blender your kind of your first one, your foray into 3D, as it were? Cool. The latency is crazy. I didn't know the latency was that bad on Twitch. Do you guys know of anything I can do to decrease the latency? Or is it pretty normal? Oh. Cool, Basic Panther. That's really exciting. That's fun. Okay, normal for Twitch. Good to know. Good to know. All right, so I have extended these trims, trims on the bottom of the bridge out a little bit, just to make sure that they don't. I just want to make sure that they connect with the building on either side. So I think that that's enough. That's enough modeling without seeing how it looks. So let's go ahead and the Dexter. How do you guys get motivation to finish something? Well, we only have one ship title, which is called Leaving Lindau, which is in our, what is it called? The panels thing at the bottom. And we shipped that. That was kind of a spin-off title of our current game, Eastshade, which is this huge thing that I decided to do. I was working in AAA games, and I just really wanted to make my own game, and I had the idea for this thing, and I had some money saved up, and I thought that if I just quit and went all in and just did it, that it was what I wanted to do, and if it didn't make any money, then I would be fine, because that's all I've ever wanted to do with my money anyway, was just try to make an indie game. And if I run out and fail, then I'll just go back and get a job and save up some money again and then do it again. That's pretty much what I want to do. So for me, after like a year working on it full time, there's kind of no going back. Like, you've already spent so much time on it, and yeah, I don't know. I guess for me, going full time on it and spending my life savings on it doesn't really give me many options. But then Leaving Lindau came about because we were taking so long on Eastshade that it started to feel like, oh my gosh, if we mess up the release of Eastshade somehow, it's going to be horrible. Like, as someone who's never shipped a game, like myself, never having shipped a game, as being the kind of lead person in the studio, I just really felt like, oh my goodness, if I mess up the release on something small and stupid after putting so much time into it, it'll be devastating. So I thought, okay, well, let's just make a really small game. We have so many assets and we have so much stuff here. Let's try to put something really small together that will give people a taste of the world, but will also be like its own encapsulated thing. And that's when we came up with the idea for Leaving Lindau, just this crazy short 45-minute game. It's only $4 on Steam. So, and if you get it on sale, you could get it for a couple bucks or whatever. And it was a really good experience, because then we got to learn how to kind of ship games and finish them. And that one was just supposed to be, I wanted to take 2 months on it, and it ended up taking 6 months. And then I ported it to PlayStation 4, and that took another 2 months. So finally now it's been about 7 months since we initially released Leaving Lindau on Steam, and it's finally now making back its investment, which is sweet, because then we could just do this, and hopefully we'll be sustainable and can keep making games. But yeah, I don't know if I have any special tricks for motivation. There's that saying, who's that author? Stephen King. He has this really famous, like, kind of harsh saying that, like, some of us wait for motivation to do something, and the rest of us just get to work. And I don't actually feel that way. I feel like I kind of need motivation. I just kind of hope for it. And another thing that is very motivating is progress. Like, if you feel really unmotivated, sometimes, even though it hurts, like it physically hurts to just like, oh my God, open Blender and do this stupid thing. I do not want to do this right now. If you just do a little bit and choose something that you can actually make progress on, then you know, you work on it for like 10 minutes, and you can even tell yourself, okay, I'm only going to work on it for like 20 minutes. That's it. Just 20 minutes. It's going to suck so bad and I'm going to hate it, but it's just 20 minutes. And then I'm going to like, whatever, go play video games or something. At the end of the 20 minutes, you've made progress and you actually feel a lot more inspired. And you're like, actually, I kind of want to keep doing this. And you can keep doing that. That's one trick that's worked for me a couple times. Oh yeah, I still need to get that sometime. Yeah, it's a cool little thing. If you've never played a short game, they're definitely different. I mean, it's kind of like a video game cup of coffee. I've described it, because it's, you know, a lot of people expect to get into this long thing and then it just kind of ends and they're a little bit underwhelmed. But I've played a lot of short games and I really like the format, so it might be a cool thing. Okay, I think it's high time we put this in the engine. So I'm gonna move this. All right, so we can see that there's tons of stuff not parented to this. And there it is, our bridge. Oops, we got this national park loaded. I'm gonna unload this, remove scene. And you can see it's really bright. It doesn't have much value contrast in it. So thank you, the Dexter. Yeah, I think it works pretty well. I think that the brick needs to be darker. So I've got this. Well, first I'll vertex paint it a little. And this is really confusing. There's a lot of really confusing things about the way I've set things up. But I use the red and green color channels in the vertices for vertex blending, and I use the blue for lighting. So if I just paint in the blue, like I'm just doing more blue, like darker blue right now, then it'll just get darker. So I'm just darkening the kind of edges to get a little bit of lighting. And I'm hoping this will be a good example. If anyone's still around from the beginning of the stream, I was talking about how painting lighting into the vertices is really easy and really cheap and makes a really big difference. You can see how that little bit of lighting kind of grounded the bridge a little bit more. Okay, but now here's the other thing we can do is I got this blend shader that I've already set up. So I've got the dirty brick. So I'm just gonna pick a red and I'll just do add. And we'll just add in some red so that this looks like tie-dye garbage. There we go. Now we got some dirty brick in there and it's starting to make some value contrast. And that works pretty well. Oh, I know how you feel. So, did you do like CAD stuff, the Dexter, in college or something? I think the architecture background though can help a lot. At Sucker Punch, the last company I worked at, we had someone who used to do architecture stuff, and he was really good at especially making buildings because he just had such a good sense of what works and what doesn't. You can make some really wonky stuff if you don't have a good knowledge of architecture. So I think it can help, but it also can kind of feel restrictive if you yeah, I guess it can be tough if you're too set on making things like realistic in terms of their sizes and widths and everything. Oh, sweet. Apprenticeship. That's cool. Okay, so I'm gonna put some darken these corners a little bit. Did you do all of this yourself? I have a composer and a publicist, and my girlfriend is also an artist, and she's not a 3D artist, but she does, like, there's a bunch of illustrations in the game in Eastshade, and she does those, and they look super awesome. And she also does a lot of like the writing. But in terms of the 3D art, I do all the environment art and all the coding and design and stuff. I'm like the only full-timer. And I also have a friend who does the character art, most of the character art. So yeah, it's a lot. We wear a lot of hats, especially me. All right, darkening the corners here a little bit. And I think that these trims and everything are too bright. They've got to be darker. It's that stupid OCD about the value thing, about the brightness of things. Okay. So I've got them selected. Now I'm just going to go in and darken them. And the insides should probably be pretty dark because there's going to be a lot less light getting in there. So I think I'll just grab all these. Oh, there's a pretty cool tool in Blender. Select similar, and you can select anything with a similar like property, and in this case the similar normal is going to get everything facing inward. And then I can just vertex paint these and just apply a dark vertex color to them. Of course, that's going to bring out their actually maybe that looks good. I don't know. Okay, this thing needs support loops. It looked really soft. Oh, I already put them on. Wow, going crazy. I don't even know how long have I been streaming. I don't know how to see that. I'm new to this. I know you can see it in your dashboard, but I don't want to leave the stream. Oh, who cares? Okay, so I'm adding edge loops. I think I'll probably go for, let's say I'll go 7:30 my time. I'll go another half an hour. Oh, okay. So my plan, good. Oh, OBS. Oh, of course. Oh, so 3 hours. Okay. Thank you. A plethora. That's a good It's a good screen name. 3 hours. It's pretty good. It's a pretty good stream for my first one. All right. Oh, what was I saying? Okay. Oh yeah, I wanted to tell you guys that my plan for the bridge, I think it's kind of crappy to have a bridge in a game and not be able to walk through it. But I don't really have a purpose for this building. Like, this building right here is the tea house, which has a lot of the interior arted out because we use this in Leaving Lindau. So like, you could walk around just this section. You couldn't do any. So you were looking outside and seeing this crazy city and you couldn't go there. Kind of tantalizing. But of course in Eastshade, you can go wherever you want. It's a big open world game. But I don't really have a use for this building. So I think I'm just going to make a big door at the bottom, and then you interact with the door, and then it teleports you onto the bridge. So you get the sense that you went into that building to go up to the bridge, but you don't actually get to walk around in the building. I don't know if people are going to hate that. Do you guys think that players are going to hate that? Like, they click on a door and it teleports them up? Should be fine. Okay. Good, good, good. All right, so the bridge, the silhouette of the bridge is doink right on the top, just like zoom, laser beam across. That's terrible. Silhouette's really, really important. If you can only do one thing, then make it a good silhouette. And you can see on this Oxford bridge, they have this beautiful centerpiece. Ours doesn't have the hump in the middle. We just have a straight across bridge because it would be kind of weird to put a hump with one side higher than the other. It might work okay, but that's just not the way I made it. So I would like to do something. I think I could actually do something similar, just not at the top of a hump. I'm going to try to do that. Okay. So I'm going to delete that. And I'm going to duplicate this entire object and grab this top trim and just delete everything else. Gone. And now just use this, and I can just cut into this guy. Well, bevel that. And now we've got a nice chunk and we're guaranteed that this chunk is in the center of our bridge. Okay. So let's make some kind of piece here. That looks a little bit fat. Now we're a little skewed. See, this is why it's so hard to work when things are skewed. I mean, I'm freaking making a box here and it still gets all wonky. Okay. So that's already helping, I can tell. That's helping a lot. But I think we can do like, let's do it. Let's get another one. So I duped it again. Select the top trim, delete everything else. See, this is so much faster than placing a new like primitive into the world. Just duplicating an old primitive and modifying it. Okay, now I just want this one face. And what I'm going to do, I think that should have been a little bigger. All right. Okay. Oh, I keep saying K. That's my resting word. So I'm trying to make like a cool loopy swirly thing, kind of like the one they have. Flip these normals. I'm just gonna kind of jam on it. I don't really have a plan yet even. See, this is one of those things where I probably should have just done it straight on. I'm doing it in the skew where I could have just done it straight on and then skewed it afterward. But we've already started. I'm trying to get a sense. I'm looking at the silhouette, trying to get a sense if that's going to look cool, if that's going to fit the bill. I feel the top is so empty. It's hurting me. It's hurting my eyeballs. Okay. It's time to select all these and just do extrude and move on individual normals. Should I go that way or that way? I think I'll go that way. And of course, if anyone has any questions or anything like that, I'm open to questions. And this is looking a little weird. I don't really like the way that's looking. Okay. Time to cut my losses. Deleting this. Just deleting one side. Just give me this one. And now let's do this thing the proper way, head on like this. We're not even going to worry about its placement in regards to the rest of the model. And I'm going to do a proper swoopy swoop. Okay. I'm going to bevel the parts that are choppy, like this one. Bevel. And we'll bevel this one. Bevel. Okay. And this one's looking pretty choppy as well. Bevel. Extrude and move on individual normals. Okay, that's looking much better, I can tell. Flip the normals, and now I can just do one side like a sane person, and oops, you know, we'll move this over here. Oh hell, no, we won't do that. Sorry, undoing. So move that into place. Okay. Does that look weird? I cannot tell. Okay, now I know that this part should be like connecting to the, there, really feels like it's on there. And now we can get another one and flip. All right, here's another little tip for anyone that uses Blender and Unity. If you scale an object to negative, like I just did, that's how I flipped it. These normals, they look correct in Blender, but they'll be backwards in Unity. And oh my God, it's so hard to pinpoint what the problem was. So you just have to click on the object and apply the scale there, and now the normals are going to be right in unity. Okay. So I think I'm just going to rotate this to get it in there. Really, rotation isn't really what should be, a skew, not a rotate, but I don't think it's going to matter too much. Okay, I think that's working. I think it's working. Ooh, gross. No. Okay, that one a little bit more up, and I think we can move the whole kit and caboodle down a little. And each of these can be a little bit fatter. Doink. Doink. Flip normals. I think it could still be fatter. This one a little fatter. That just looks so askew because I rotated it. Shouldn't have done that. Just doesn't look right. Doesn't look right. Oh well, let's put it in the engine, see what we got. Unwrap one face. Follow active quads. Ew, that didn't really follow them the way I wanted it to. Follow active quads on a different face. There, that's a little bit better. Okay. And I'm gonna have to do some mad wiffle waffling here. So now I'm just moving the UVs. I just folded the UVs back on themselves 4 times. So each row of polygons on each side of the beam has is mapped to the trim. Okay. Squaring this up and following the active quads. Really love that. Really love that tool. Okay. Another trick you can do with the vertex color is you can just bake ambient occlusion like super fast. There, boom, done. And that can be a quick way to get some lighting too. Great for mobile too if you're making a mobile game. Anything in the vertex color is going to be so cheap and easy on the computer resources. Okay. Let's see. I think these are probably going to need some edge loops. You know, all of this probably needs to be smoothed if I haven't already. Smooth, shade the smooth. Oh, this is like definitely needs edge loops. Support loops. I keep calling them edge loops. I guess they are edge loops, but they're for anyone who missed the beginning of the stream. If you want something to shade, like it has beveled edges, but you don't want to actually bevel the edges, because beveling the edges makes a lot of problems. You could just add the edge loops and turn the thing on smooth, and then it'll do a really nice smoothing. You can see it better in solid mode. Actually, yeah, that's a really good visualization. So this thing is super blobby, which actually, now that I see this, make it conform a little bit better. to make it a little bit more cut without actually putting in edge splits, because edge splits are gonna make it look really, really cut, which sometimes that can look really like gamey in 3D when you see like super hard facets. You can just put these support loops, and now you can see that made it look way more cut. Oops. And we can do the same thing on the front. Kind of expensive though, so you know, because it doubles up all of the polygons. But yeah, you just got to choose when it's worth it to do. This is kind of a pretty big piece on the top. Might not end up mattering that much though, these edge loops. We'll see. Okay, I know that this needs to go further down for sure. All right, kind of looks like Art Deco, like kind of like that 30s and 40s futuristic look. I don't really know if I like that. Well, it's definitely better than nothing, that's for sure. Definitely better than nothing. I don't know if it's what I want though. Let me go back to the reference. See that the swoopies I did on the top are kind of the inverse of these swoopies, and I knew that I was doing that, but I just thought I mix it up a little, and I think that it makes it look so Art Deco. If you don't know what Art Deco is, I'll type it in the Googler. Yeah, this kind of super like lots of gold and very old looking, very BioShocky, and I don't really want that, so I think I'm gonna do it all over again. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. Yeah, I don't like that. Can't do that. All right. In the end, the reference knows best. Okay. You know, I actually think that might be a good place to stop for me. You guys might be exhausted of seeing the me redo the the top of this bridge thing again. I'll just put it, oh, whatever. But we've got some stuff done. So we've got this nice bridge. We've got a really strong start to this bridge with trims and everything going on. Of course, the interior of it is rather see-through at the moment on the side. Oh, these are mapped to the wrong texture. Okay, well, we got to see what it looks like when it's not mapped to brick like that. And then I will step off line. So these trim 3, select trim 3. Okay, so those are all trim 3. We need all these to be mapped to trim 3. Assign. Okay, now let's take a gander. Oops. There we go. Okay, that's better. That's a better stopping point. Still, I feel like there's too many cuts. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't matter. I should probably just keep going. But that's for next time. And so everyone, this has been my first stream, and I really appreciate everyone who came by and took a look and played along with me, and withstood my rambling and my my technical difficulties. And of course, I really appreciate anyone who followed and whatnot. So I look forward to streaming again. I don't know I don't know of a schedule yet. I'm just getting started here, so I don't know what's going to be the best schedule, what's going to work best for me and work best for other people. So I'm probably just going to be kind of streaming at random times until I get the hang of it more. But anyhow, I'll see you all later. Thanks very much.